Clean up your room now. Do you think you're in a position to take a break? Annie's voice cut through the air as she splashed beer on me. The sticky liquid clung to my skin, and the pungent smell of alcohol filled the room. I stood there, stunned by the suddenness of her actions. Annie continued to hurl words at me, but I couldn't grasp what she wanted. I was lost, unsure of what to do or how to respond. Just then, a voice echoed from the computer. The instant I recognized who it was, Annie, who had been red with anger, suddenly froze. Her body tensed, and she collapsed to the floor. My name is Karen, and I'm 33 years old. I work as an administrator at a local company, managing documents and crunching numbers with my calculator. Even though I often thought about using the computer more efficiently, I wasn't in a position to make such suggestions. I had to tread carefully around my superiors, attending company parties out of obligation. My mental health was nearing its limit. There's another mistake in this number. I'm sorry, but you've been making more errors lately. Be careful. Fatigue was taking its toll, leading to more mistakes, and my confidence in my work was crumbling. I began to wonder if quitting this job might be the best option. That's when a man from outside the company started visiting. His name was Andy, the man who would later become my husband. At first glance, Andy's gentle nature was obvious. Even during simple greetings, he treated me with warmth and kindness. Over time, I found myself completely captivated by him. But I lacked the courage to express my feelings, assuming Andy didn't share the same interest. However, a few months after he started visiting the company, Andy surprised me by showing an active interest. Dinners after work turned into dates, and after about 2 years, we decided to get married. After our wedding, I left my job to start a new life with Andy. We visited many properties together, searching for a home we both loved. I was excited about the future, looking forward to the wonderful days ahead. But the life that awaited us was far from what I had imagined. Just a month after our wedding, I began noticing something off about Andy. "Welcome home, Andy. You're back early," I greeted him, but he didn't even look at me. His response was curt. This behavior, so different from before, worried me. He seemed out of sorts, slightly irritated. "Are you okay? You look tired." "Huh? Yeah," he replied, but his mood remained distant. At the time, I'd attributed it to exhaustion and didn't think much of it. But the next day, and the days that followed, Andy's behavior stayed the same. His words, his demeanor, even his actions, like coming home late without any notice, became more careless. I wondered if I had said something to upset Annie. I kept replaying my actions, words, and thoughts about her, trying to pinpoint where I might have gone wrong. But even as time passed, I couldn't figure out what had changed. Then, a few months after Annie's behavior shifted, the situation took a dramatic turn. One evening during dinner, Annie suddenly began hurling harsh words at me. She hadn't even taken a bite of her food when she said, "Karen, you get it." "Get what?" I asked, taken aback by her abruptness. There was no clear context, and I was unsure how to respond. Without hesitation, she replied, "Your cooking tastes awful." "Awful? Really?" I stammered, shocked by her words. "Yeah, haven't you noticed? I wish you knew how I feel, having to eat such terrible food every day." Throughout our relationship, I had frequently cooked for her, and she had never criticized my cooking like this before. In fact, she used to enjoy the meals I made, often expressing her appreciation. The thought that she now found my cooking unpalatable was completely unexpected. "But you used to enjoy my cooking," I remarked, still trying to process her sudden change in attitude. "Did I?" she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Seeing my surprised expression, Annie burst into laughter. When she finally stopped, she tossed her knife and fork onto the table and headed to the bedroom, leaving her food untouched. As I stared at the uneaten meal in front of me, I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Had she been silently enduring my cooking all this time, or had my skills really declined? No matter how much I pondered it, I couldn't make sense of the situation. I couldn't reach a satisfying conclusion, but one thought kept crossing my mind. Considering Andy's recent behavior and harsh remarks, perhaps he doesn't love me anymore. I used to think he was just tired, but his recent actions seemed excessive. The Andy I knew would have been upfront if something was bothering him. If that's the case, I can't help but wonder if I've done something to offend him. But try as I might, I can't recall doing anything wrong. As my doubts about Andy grew, another 2 months passed, and he became even colder. The warmth and kindness he once showed when we were dating had completely vanished. He started snapping at me daily, showing irritation over the smallest things. "Did you even clean?" he snapped one day. "What? Clean what?" I replied, confused. "The bathroom isn't clean, and the living room is a mess too. I always try to keep the house tidy. I vacuum and organize every day, doing my best to maintain our home." But now, I wondered how much more I needed to do to satisfy him. What was I supposed to do? As I wallowed in disappointment, Andy showered me with even more criticism. But of all the hurtful words he said, the one that stung the most was, "Why did I ever marry a woman like this?" Was his past love for me just an illusion? The thought made tears well up in my eyes. "Wait, are you crying?" "I hope that's not just an act," he scoffed. Once he would have comforted me, now all he offered were cold words. He gave a dismissive snort before heading to the bedroom. We used to share the bed, but lately I've been sleeping elsewhere. More often than not, the living room sofa has become my bed. I felt belittled and ignored by Andy, yet I couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. I lacked the courage to end our relationship because deep down, I still believed in Andy. Unfortunately, my feelings went unnoticed, and his behavior only worsened. "Hey, where's the food?" he'd demand, only to criticize it moments later. "Who can even eat this?" I had suggested eating out several times, but he never agreed and never explained why. The moment he returned from work, he'd start complaining about the dirt at the entrance, the state of the bathroom, or something else, and then sharply demand food. As I noticed the change in his behavior, I tried to figure out the cause. But eventually, I realized he was probably just using me as an outlet for his stress. The inconsistencies in his actions and the way he vented led me to that conclusion. I understood that work could be tiring for Andy, but I wasn't a robot. The constant complaints were taking their toll on me. "Andy, I need to talk to you about something," I said with determination. "I'm stressed from always hearing complaints from you. I know work tires you out, but taking it out on me isn't fair." He looked at me surprised. "What are you talking about?" "I mean every word. Every time you come home from work, you lash out at me, but I'm doing my best too." He smirked, as if mocking my words, but then his face turned red with rage. "You're just a housewife, but the house isn't even clean, and your cooking is terrible. Why shouldn't you get complaints? I can't stand seeing you so relaxed. If there's a specific problem, tell me and I'll try to improve," I offered, trying to find a way to make things better. "No point telling you," he snapped. "You won't change anything. You should figure out what you're doing wrong." He kept dodging my questions, and from this conversation alone, it was clear he only saw me as an outlet for his stress. Expressing my feelings only strained our relationship further. His words grew harsher, and his cold attitude became more prevalent. The happy times we once shared were now a distant memory. I longed for those moments in silence, but my sighs only grew deeper as the days passed. I received a call from an unexpected person, my mother-in-law. We didn't usually communicate often, so I was curious as I answered the phone. "Hello, Karen, how have you been?" She greeted me warmly. I could feel the kindness in her voice, even through the phone. After a bit of chit-chat, she made a surprising proposition. "Handmade crafts?" she asked. "Yes, Karen, didn't you mention that you create handmade items? I've become interested and was wondering if you'd be willing to teach me." I was taken aback. I had been enjoying handmade crafts as a hobby, gathering materials and tools, and immersing myself in my work whenever Andy wasn't around. I had mentioned it to my mother-in-law once but hadn't expected her to remember. "Of course I'd love to," I replied, excited by the idea. That conversation led to us speaking more frequently over the phone. At first it was just regular calls, but as we wanted to show each other our work and explain the materials in detail, we started video calling. Though we didn't live too far apart, visiting regularly was difficult. So, at the agreed upon times, I would sit in the room filled with my crafting tools, and we'd craft together while video chatting. The weariness in my heart, caused by Andy's behavior, felt somewhat eased during these chats with her. "How has Andy been lately?" she asked one day. "I rarely hear from him, so I'm curious." "Oh, he's fine," I answered, keeping my tone light. "That's good to know." I hadn't shared the recent troubles with Andy with my mother-in-law, preferring to keep those issues to myself for now. I didn't want to burden her with my troubles. Our time together allowed me to forget about Andy for a while. even though his behavior remained unchanged and I continued to struggle. I kept all of that hidden from her. But one day, a few weeks after we started video calling, something unexpected happened. After preparing food and cleaning the house, I was video chatting with my mother-in-law when suddenly the door slammed open. It was Andy. I turned to see him standing near the door, holding something in his hand. He seemed completely unaware of the ongoing video call and slowly approached me. "What are you sneaking around doing in here? Did you finish cleaning?" "What about the laundry?" he demanded. "I've already done that," I replied, trying to keep calm. "You saw me doing housework, didn't you?" "I didn't," he snapped. Andy had been engrossed in watching TV in the living room, so his reply wasn't unexpected. "You're always watching TV," I muttered. "What? You're annoying," Andy yelled. "Clean this room now. Do you think you can just take a break?" Then, without warning, he threw what he was holding at me. The smell hit me instantly. It was beer. My clothes were soaked, sticky with the scent of alcohol clinging to them. Andy looked amused by the scene he had just caused. I was so shocked that I couldn't find any words. "Once you understand, get on with the task," he barked before kicking over a pile of books nearby. His displeased laughter echoed throughout the room. I said nothing, just staring at the books soaked in beer. At that moment, an unexpected voice rang out, cutting through the tense silence. "Is that all you have to say?" The voice was familiar, and it was coming from the computer. It was Andy's father, my father-in-law. "Dad?" Andy's voice wavered, his intimidating presence suddenly fading into fear. "I saw everything," my father-in-law said sternly, yelling at Karen, throwing beer at her. "What were you thinking?" "It's not what you think, Dad. It's a misunderstanding," Andy stammered, visibly shaken by his father's anger. "A misunderstanding? What do you mean by that?" his father demanded. "It seems like this isn't the first time something like this has happened, is it? When did you become like this?" My father-in-law's voice was filled with disappointment, the kind that cuts deep. Andy stood silent beside me, no longer the domineering figure he had been just moments before. Then my father-in-law turned to me with an unexpected offer. "Karen, would you come over to our place? Right away. I'm worried about you staying there with Andy. If it's okay with you, I'll come to pick you up right now." His offer caught me off guard, but as I considered it, I realized how unpredictable things could become if I stayed alone with Andy. "Are you sure it's okay?" I asked hesitantly. "No problem at all," he'd assured me. Then, turning back to Andy, he warned, "If you harm Karen anymore, I will never forgive you." With that, he ended the call. I hurriedly packed a few things and waited at the entrance. Andy, visibly unsettled, didn't say a word or try to stop me. After a while, my father-in-law arrived. The moment he stepped through the door, Andy's face showed an unprecedented level of fear. "Andy, you'd better reflect on your actions tonight. Do you understand?" his father said firmly. Andy simply nodded, his fear palpable. Please forgive me," Andy stammered. "What are you saying?" "Apologize to Karen, not me. Remember that, and think hard." After scolding Andy, my father-in-law escorted me outside. Although I had changed into clean clothes, I hadn't had time to shower and still felt sticky. My father-in-law gently wrapped a towel around me and guided me to the car. We soon arrived at his house, where my mother-in-law welcomed us with concern. "Karen, are you all right?" she asked, hugging me warmly. "Yes, I'm sorry," I replied. My mother-in-law led me to the bathroom, handing me towels and a change of clothes. "Take your time," she said. "Here are towels and fresh clothes." "Thank you so much." In the midst of the whirlwind, my emotions were in turmoil. After bathing, I changed into the clothes that had been prepared for me and joined my in-laws in the living room. My father-in-law had a serious expression, while my mother-in-law looked anxious. "Thank you for everything," I said. "You're welcome," my mother-in-law replied. "Was the water temperature okay?" "Yes, it was perfect," I answered, sinking into the sofa. "Karen, can you tell us what happened?" my father-in-law asked. I hesitated, unsure where to begin. So that wasn't the first time, was it?" "No, it wasn't," I admitted. "Please tell us, Karen." I took a deep breath and carefully chose my words. My in-laws listened attentively as I explained the events following our marriage and why I had kept it from them until now. They absorbed every detail. "So that's why it came to this," my father-in-law said after a moment. You should have told us sooner. We would have understood. I didn't want to worry you, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. I understand how you feel, Karen. You shouldn't have kept silent about someone like him, my mother-in-law said gently. Yes, I'm sorry, I said, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Though they scolded me softly, their concern was evident, and I felt they genuinely cared about me. There was a brief silence as my in-laws processed everything. After a few minutes, my father-in-law finally broke the silence. Karen, do you still love Andy? Pardon? I have a feeling he'll just repeat his mistakes, my father-in-law said firmly. For your sake, I think it's best if you divorce him. Decisions like this are best made quickly. My mother-in-law, sitting beside him, nodded in agreement. Divorce Andy, she urged. I was taken aback by the suggestion from his parents. The idea of divorce seemed so final, and despite everything, I still loved him. The thought of him never changing troubled me deeply, yet I felt torn. They waited silently for me to decide. After some thought, I made up my mind. I will divorce Andy, I said. I had tried to make things work and offered countless suggestions, but he had ignored them all. I believed that if we continued as a married couple, he would only continue to treat me coldly. Relief washed over their faces at my decision. After discussing it further with my in-laws, I was determined to move forward with a divorce. I could finally distance myself from Andy, although a part of me hoped he might change his mind. The overwhelming feeling I had when deciding to divorce was relief. The following week, I went to our house with my in-laws, carrying the court papers, including an affidavit of the defendant. When I rang the doorbell, I heard footsteps approaching, and Andy opened the door. Karen, Dad, Mom, he greeted, clearly surprised and disappointed to see his parents standing there with me. It was evident he hadn't expected that I wouldn't come alone after everything that had happened. We entered the house and took a seat on the sofa, with my in-laws sitting on either side of me. Andy looked uncomfortable but didn't offer any apologies. I turned to face him directly. Andy, let's get a divorce. Divorce? He repeated, sounding incredulous. I've been thinking about it. I don't have the courage to envision a future with you anymore. Even if we lived together again, you'd probably repeat the same mistakes and forget what happened before. That's not true, he said defensively. Can you honestly claim that you've changed? I asked. You haven't even properly apologized for what happened up until last week. You're just offering lip service without showing any genuine regret. I'm sorry, Andy said, startled by my words. But it was too late. The decision had been made. I had lost all sense of forgiveness toward him. It was too late for anything now. Standing by my in-laws, I reviewed the court papers with resolve. I faced Andy with newfound confidence. Why would you say that? I asked, trying to understand his reaction. What were you thinking? After everything that happened last week, you didn't even apologize to me. It seems you never considered the possibility of divorce. If you truly understood the gravity of your actions, you wouldn't be so shocked by the mention of it. I realize I made mistakes, but I don't think it's serious enough for a divorce, Andy protested. Really? I said, incredulously. That's unbelievable. Andy seemed to freeze, his previous bravado gone. Though visibly troubled, he eventually agreed to the divorce. Not once did he show genuine remorse. As I packed my things to leave the house, I asked him, why did you start treating me so poorly after we got married? You weren't like this when we were dating. Hesitating, Andy replied, I didn't want you to look down on me. Did I ever make you feel that way? I questioned. No, you didn't, he admitted. Stop imagining these absurd things, I said, shaking my head. I then left the house with my in-laws, knowing I would never return. I felt a pang of sadness as I left the home I had loved. After finalizing the divorce, I stayed with my in-laws. My financial situation as a housewife wasn't enough to start a new life alone, so their offer for me to stay was a relief. Initially, I felt uneasy, but I soon adapted to my new life and found joy in doing handmade crafts with my mother-in-law. Throughout this time, I received messages from Andy, who seemed unable to let go. However, after my father-in-law sent a firm message from my phone saying, I'm cutting ties with you, Andy's communication ceased entirely. I suspected he hadn't anticipated that I'd be living with his parents. Perhaps he thought that keeping in touch after our divorce might lead to reconciliation. It felt as though he was looking down on me. I am genuinely grateful to my in-laws for suggesting the divorce. A year has passed since then, and while working part-time, I lead a fulfilling life on my own. Though I felt bad about relying on them too much, I decided to be independent even after leaving their home. My relationship with my in-laws remains strong, and they continue to support me. Though we are not related by blood, they welcome me with the warmth of a real family. My goal now is to show my gratitude towards them and find ways to bring them joy every day. I live with a heart full of appreciation for my in-laws.